You might have noticed one of our videos on the oldest of Fallout Ghouls, and we've decided to revisit the concept, uncovering a few more elder irradiated examples, with some directly from your comments. Naturally, you can't fit every ghoul into one list, and we've actually found some even older ones than we did before. I'm Mark from Digital Dissection. I make Fallout lore videos, and today we're talking about 9 more ghouls who have been around for many years. It might seem odd to pick an entire city for this list, but it's worth pointing out Necropolis, simply due to how it began. Known as the City of the Dead, the site is what remains of Bakersfield, California, and was founded by the unfortunate residents of Vault 12. One of Vault-Tec's more notably cruel experiments, Vault 12 was constructed as having every amenity that survivors of the Great War would need, with its considerable water filtration system being a big draw for those interested in post-war survival. Unfortunately for those who sought refuge in Vault 12, its door was designed to not actually close, and as the bombs began to fall, radiation slowly made its way throughout the facility. By the summer of 2083, its inhabitants emerged, who by that point were all ghoulified, and joined similar ghouls on the surface to form a permanent settlement. Granted, one that was not welcome to outsiders, refusing to trade with most caravans, and capturing others and eating them, earning a reputation for anyone outside its community to stay away. Ultimately, the fate of Necropolis and its citizens falls on certain events of Fallout 1 to unfold. But regardless of what happens, its survivors are dispersed into the wastes. Depending on the age of those who originally entered Vault 12, it's possible that by Fallout 1's events, they'd be at minimum 115 years old. But if these citizens survived until the events of the Fallout TV show, this could make them as high as 250 to 260 years old. Since we're not quite sure, of course, we'll keep them as our earliest pick this time around. Jason Bright is a rare example of ghouls across the Fallout franchise for quite a few reasons. Bright is a non-feral glowing one, of which there are only a small amount across the entire series. He also happens to lead a cult-like organization, which further puts him in unique company. Jason Bright, however, is a pre-war ghoul, a survivor of the Great War itself, and leader of the Bright Brotherhood. By surviving the Great War, Bright assumed that this gave him a unique destiny, that he was chosen by an entity named the Creator, making Jason Bright a prophet to lead an expedition known as the Great Journey. Bright also claims that the Creator showed him visions of the far beyond, a safe haven for ghoul kind that will allow the Bright Brotherhood to escape bigotry and finally be at peace. Bright's demeanor as a non-feral glowing one make him interesting enough, but there might be something to his claims about being a prophet, as he has an ethereal voice compared to most ghouls. It actually echoes, unlike any other ghoul encountered in the series. He's also one of the few glowing ones that won't cause rad's exposure while standing next to him. Bright's age, of course, is what got him on this list, as he's at minimum 204 years old when encountered, and depending on his age when the bombs fell, he could easily be 220 to 230 years old. Captain Zhao of the People's Republic of China played a key role in the missile strikes that destroyed the city of Boston. Thank you to the Great Papyrus 420 for this suggestion. On October 23, 2077, under Zhao's command, the Yangtze submarine launched the majority of its missiles that directly hit the Commonwealth, and most likely created the Glowing Sea. Shortly after launching the payloads, Zhao pulled the submarine into Boston's harbor, and after seeing the devastation they caused, felt immense guilt for the destruction. By this point, however, the Yangtze had struck a sea mine, and Zhao, along with his crew, slowly succumbed to the effects of radiation poisoning, as the sub's nuclear reactor began leaking. Zhao was one of the fortunate members who did not turn feral, but couldn't bring himself to dispatch those who did, leaving the corridors of the submarine filled with his former crazed crewmates. The submarine captain is reluctant to leave his vessel based on raiders who might want to salvage the submarine, but will still occasionally venture into the wastes to find survival items. However, the ghoulified captain hopes to one day return to China and live out his final days there. We're comfortable assuming that Zhao was at least 21 years old at the time he became the sub's captain, which puts him in the area of at least 230 years old. Beatrix Russell is one very well-traveled and the oldest of Fallout's ghouls. As a mercenary, she works for the followers of the Apocalypse in Freeside, just outside the New Vegas gates. She views the organization in a positive light, but yearns to do something more exciting, especially as the followers won't let her drink on the job. and she has a rather long-standing relationship with Absinthe. While Beat-rix can lead to an interesting adult-oriented side quest that we won't be exploring here, digging into her background leads to the disclosure of her pre-war life, as she not only lived before Fallout's bombs, she actually knows quite a bit about Robert Edwin House, CEO of Robco and founder of New Vegas. Beat-rix will tell the player that she remembers quite a bit about House and the successes he had entering the robotics market, discussing how he made Robco virtually an overnight juggernaut within the industry. She notably remembered his interviews given to the national media and found him charming. Robert House, of course, was born in 2020, founded Robco by 2042, and was a billionaire by 2050. Given that House was a recluse in the years leading up to the Great War, Beat-rix likely saw him at the height of his domination of the robotics industry. Overall, this could place Beat-rix in the realm of 220 to 240 years old, and possibly more. Dunwich Borers in Fallout 4 is already creepy enough on its own, as the quarry owned by pre-war company Dunwich Borers LLC is home to many nightmarish possibilities. The site was explored by the Earth Excavation Company as a front for their cult, who worshipped ancient gods of unknown origins. In digging deeper into the earth, they'd find ritual sites for human sacrifices, statues, and temples. One of the individuals leading the effort was named Tim Schutz, and he alerted the Dunwich leadership that the underground temple had been discovered. Schutz would fear that his fellow project managers would discover the ruse, and at his management's instruction, chose to distract his fellow employees until leadership arrived. Schutz unfortunately was deceived by his superiors, and instead of being rewarded, was most likely sacrificed in a ritual fashion, as he, along with 3 other project managers, became feral ghouls, held deep within the quarry and have been there since before the Great War. Bob Stanson, John Hatfield, and Bradley Ramone can all be found in the depths of the quarry alongside Schutz, fates being sealed by deception, trapped for hundreds of years, and making them easily over 240 years old. If you found the wreck of the FMS Northern Star, you probably went after the agility bobblehead located there. But there's something that doesn't quite make sense about the location, in that there's a faction of raiders that live amongst the wreckage, and they don't speak English. The Northern Star washed up on Boston's shores as they were on a route there shortly before the bombs fell. The crew hailed from Norway, and despite their computer entries appearing in English, they do not know how to speak the local language. Once the Northern Star crashed on Boston's shores, the crew chose to stay near their ship, with all slowly suffering from the ghoulification process. The Northern Star crew might be labeled as raiders, but it's hard to really assume that this is accurate. While the crew will open fire on anyone approaching their home, they'll shout at players to go away, and to leave them alone. It's a relatively sad story, as while many Norwegian speakers in our world are likely familiar with English, the Northern Star crew of the Fallout world never learned it. If we assume that the Northern Star survivors are at least adult-aged, this would place them anywhere from 230 to 240 years old at minimum. Fallout 4's sole survivor may have been lucky enough to enter Vault 111, and of course lucky is a relative term. The same can't be said for the sole survivor's neighbors, who weren't fortunate enough to gain entry, and they can be seen congregating near the fence leading to the vault at the beginning of the game. Due to the military presence protecting the vault, the neighbors have no choice but to take shelter nearby, and the results are not exactly heartwarming. Via random encounter, your neighbors will reappear, and you'll quickly notice that they're a pack of feral ghouls roaming the wastes. If you pay attention to the names of the ghouls, you'll find familiar ones that appear in the Sanctuary Hills neighborhood. This include the Parkers, the Sumners, and the Donahue families. You'll also sadly find the widowed Miss Rosa and her son Chris. For over 210 years, these feral ghouls have existed in the Boston Commonwealth, but several of them were already well into adulthood, making their ages potentially anywhere from 230 years old, and possibly into the 250-year range, if not more. Oswald the Outrageous, or Oswald Oppenheimer, is a magician who once worked for the Nuka-Cola Corporation. He'd perform at the Kitty Kingdom, one of the 2 areas found at their Nuka World attraction. The park itself opened in 2050, and while it's not known exactly when Oswald began his time with them, his magic shows became a massive draw for the park, selling out within hours every day. When the Great War began, however, Oswald and many employees of the park did what they could to take shelter there, but they would all succumb to various levels of ghoulification or radiation poisoning. Oswald is yet another example of a glowing one who managed to retain his sanity. Unlike Jason Bright, who we mentioned earlier, however, he does give off radiation if players get too close. As a glowing one, Oswald has learned to control his powers, and has resurrected dead ghouls by manipulating their radiation levels, which he believes is actual magic that he's learned to control. If we assume that Oswald was an original employee of Nuka World's earliest days, it creates an interesting range for how old he is. At minimum, he's at least 230 years old, but he could reach well over 250 based on when he started working there. So there's old ghouls across Fallout's games. And then there's Daisy. Thank you to MadCatDX for this suggestion. The Good Neighbor Merchant will speak fondly of life before the Great War. But that actually involves several decades even before this point. In our first list, we discussed how Desmond Lockhart was possibly the oldest ghoul who ever lived and was born as early as 2028. But Daisy will divulge information that places her even a decade before Lockhart was born. Daisy mentions that she was married at the time of the Sino-American War, which took place from 2066 to 2077, which would already put her in the area of 230 plus years old. However, she recollects that she actually was alive long before that, estimating that she could be closer to 270 years old, a secret that she doesn't want the sole survivor to necessarily share with anyone in Fallout 4. If Daisy's math is correct, it would mean she's been alive since 2017, and would make her even older than Robert House, who isn't necessarily a ghoul, but was born in the year 2020. If you believe Daisy's story, it would make her one of the oldest living beings, not just within the realm of ghouls, but possibly the oldest being in all of Fallout storytelling outside of cryogenic freezing. And with that, we've explored 9 more ghouls within Fallout who have celebrated hundreds of birthdays. Did we miss any ghouls who stood the test of time? Let us know in the comments. And for more content just like this video, check out our full Fallout Stories playlist linked here. And until next time, pop culture nerds, keep on dissecting. This is Mark signing off.